May 20th, 1916, South Georgia Island. 3 men mysteriously appear in a tiny Norwegian whaling port on the east coast of this uninhabited island. Their clothing is falling apart. Their faces are blackened with soot. 2 children spot them at the edge of town and run away, terrified. There are never any strangers here. It is one of the harshest environments on Earth. The men make their way towards the station and ask to be taken to the manager. The manager demands to know who these men are and how they've arrived on the island. One of the men replies,
"You should already know who I am." Oh boy, quite spooky, quite suspenseful stuff. Sure hope you liked that intro, because the voiceover guy cost us $75. Anyways, welcome to 55 Folks. This episode's story is the greatest story to ever come out of Antarctica. Will you be better off knowing it? I don't know, I can't answer that. Probably not, but it was quite the ordeal. So the late 1800s and early 1900s was what they call the heroic age of Antarctic exploration. So it's kind of like what the space race would come to be a little bit. It's all these explorers from different countries trying to not only be the first to reach the South Pole, but like knock out all these different exploration achievements in Antarctica, since it was the last kind of uncharted place on Earth. So this story is about a British man named Ernest Shackleton and his 1914 expedition. He had dreamed of being the first to reach the South Pole, but the Norwegians beat him to it in 1911. So this 1914 expedition, he's taking that a step farther. He's attempting to be the first to cross the entire Antarctic continent. So they're going to go to the South Pole and then keep going and cross the entire continent, because that's never been done before. So that's something he can stake his name to, and would be like this notable British achievement that would go down in history. So Shackleton's ship is called the Endurance, and there's also another crew aboard a ship called the Aurora that's going around to the Ross Sea, and their job is to hike up to the Ross ice shelf a little ways on that side of the pole to lay out food rations for when Shackleton's crossing team gets to that point. But the expedition gets off to a horrible start right away. Before they even can land at their intended point to begin crossing the continent, they get stuck in the ice like 50 miles from shore, and the boat's completely stuck, and there's no way to get it out. Turns out that year there was just unseasonably bad ice that they didn't really foresee. They had been warned about it on the way down to Antarctica, but they'd been planning this expedition for a few years now, so they decided to go ahead with it. But there's just too much ice. They could work through a lot of it on their way down, but 50 miles from shore is where they get completely stuck. So these 28 men find themselves trapped on the ice in the middle of the ocean, basically the most remote place on Earth. It's 1915, there's no communication with anyone. So once it becomes clear the boat is fully stuck and there's not much hope of getting back on track to resume their intended expedition, Shackleton makes the call that they can put all that out of their mind. We're abandoning our initial plan. Now our sole focus is to get these 28 men home safe. Only problem is there's no really clear place to go to get help. There's no one within thousands of miles, and you're not even on land, you're on the ice.
For all intensive purposes, Shackleton's mission is off to a disastrous start. But even so, he has the foresight to call off the original plan quickly, so they can divert all their focus to returning home safely.
So they're able to work their way through a lot of the ice, but eventually there's nowhere to go. And they would try to look, if there was a channel close by they thought they could get the boat into. if they could just get over there. So at one point they had these giant saws and they were like trying to get a crack started. I think probably sometimes if you could like get a crack started, and then ram the ship into it.
But at this point, the ship's stuck. So can you?
Right now, it's stuck. Yeah.
So you can't get momentum to ram.
Right.
I think, can you?
Yeah, and there's video of them trying to get the ship out.
Like a bunch of guys pushing a truck out of a mud hole. I just picture them just on.
Come on. So they're just stuck on the ice, and they begin slowly drifting with the natural churn of the ice in this sea. And for a while, they're still living on the ship, in their quarters on the ship, because it's nothing wrong with the ship. It's just stuck in the ice. So they have all their food rations, and they're able to get out, hunt seals and penguins and stuff even, and exercise the dogs, things like that. So it's really not too bad. They develop a bit of a routine, but eventually the ice starts to crush the boat. And this is where they have to evacuate and get all their stuff off, and they know it's not going to be long before the boat's just going to be crushed to the point where it's going to sink.
In the book, I remember a part where when they first knew that the ship was going to, like, at some point they knew the ship is going to sink.
Mm-hmm.
Like something, I don't know, water had started coming in or something, and they had very little time to get all their supplies off of the ship, and they didn't quite get everything out. But it's like it seemed like they barely made it out, like just in the nick of time.
The crew evacuates the Endurance in October. Just weeks later, they watch the ship sink from their camp nearby.
Once they leave the ship, Shackleton has the idea they got to get to land. I mean, it feels like they're on land, but it's just ice.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just thick ice. It's not like they're bobbing in the ocean, but they're not on the continent.
October, November is summer.
They're getting on summer for down there. So Shackleton tells them all, we're going to haul. They have these 3 lifeboats. They're hauling a bunch of stuff in, and their whole camp and everything. Shackleton wants to try to get to the continent and get to land. And the carpenter, he's a really practical guy. And he right away was like, that's not going to work. The snow and ice is too thick. We're not going to get anywhere. So he basically refused to go along with that plan. But the carpenter ended up being right. They couldn't get anywhere trying to drag all their stuff. I'd say at this point, they're not really too despaired. I mean, they lost their boat, which obviously had to be kind of scary, but they have plenty of food. Like, they're doing these hunting expeditions. They're getting seal meat. Well, the other weird thing about this time period is, today, if you go on an Antarctic expedition, you have satellite communication. You always have a way to get in touch. So this was before that, but it was after, like, photography and even video. So they had a photographer on the trip with them, which is crazy because you can like go watch all this video of it.
Yeah, that's a good point. They're kind of right in a weird spot where you have someone documenting the whole trip, but you don't have any contact with anyone else at all. One thing that it seemed like was no one really ever thought there was a chance that they could die.
Yeah.
Right away. Eventually probably the thought gets in their mind, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, like looking at it, when their boat goes down from the outside, it's like there's a better than good chance that you guys are not getting out of this.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, he was able to kind of keep them under the illusion. And maybe you have to assume that Shackleton maybe... I just assume that he probably knew, like, oh, this is not good. It's going to be a really tough thing to get out of this position.
Yeah.
But somehow he kept them under the illusion that everything is going to be fine.
Yeah, just like, all right, this is what we do now.
Yeah.
He always had a plan. He said the guys always had like at least 3 hours of work to do per day, doing jobs around camp and stuff, just to keep them busy and keep, feel like you're working towards something,
Right.
Just lay around and, oh boy, I hope we get rescued or whatever, kind of stay in control. Yeah, but that's crazy, just down there alone, what do you expect?
Yeah.
Nothing around. How
are we gonna get?
You have the lifeboats, but I mean, what are you gonna do with those?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and no one knows. Too, you have no way to communicate with the outside world, so it's not even as if you'd have to get lucky to be rescued. You're hoping that. I mean, I guess your hope for rescue, your only hope would be the other guys on the other side of the island would be like, oh, they haven't. They're not here in time, but they're not going to make it till the end of the summer. So
it seems like a leadership feat
to keep
things moving. And so eventually the ice they're on starts kind of breaking up around them and getting smaller and smaller. At one point, there's like a big crack opened kind of in the middle of the camp. A guy in a sleeping bag actually fell in to the ocean. They had to pull him out. They're realizing they can't really stay there much longer.
At this point, Shackleton orders everyone into the lifeboats. The conditions force them to pack up their camp and seek solid ground.
The ice is broken up enough where they are at this point that it feels they can find a channel to get out into the ocean, get to land.
So they made it through.
So this has been over a year. They're just camping. The other thing is how they had this navigator with them, so they always kind of knew where they were in relation to stuff, even though they're just drifting on the ice. But this guy, I don't know, some wizardry or something. He had an instrument. He measured the sun, and what it relied on was a clock that could keep really accurate time. So he used that to like noon where the sun should be and all that to calculate your position. And they had crude maps of Antarctica and stuff. So at this point, they figure their best bet is get in the boats and try to get to an island called Elephant Island. It's like 100 miles away.
But one thing about how accurate were the maps? Because even if you have, I mean, if they're probably pretty crude, even if you have your exact right, like you can know where you're at, but is your map going to be?
I don't know.
I mean, they must have been because they made it there, and
they'd probably just have, they'd know the latitude and longitude of like Elephant Island and South Georgia, all these places. But it's maybe a rough idea of that coast.
Well, I guess so. If they can do, like, they would know, like this, without a shadow of a doubt, that Elephant Island is going to be at this.
The first island, past this.
So those were. I guess that was that was accurate. The map they had.
I would think so.
That's well enough of an understood science at that point that they know that this island is going to be at this exact location.
So they knew it was there. That was their goal, to get to Elephant Island. It wasn't like, let's just go on the boat until we hit something.
Hit some random land.
So, they wanted to get to land. Just like a 7-day boat journey on all 3 boats. And these are like 20-foot boats. So this journey to Elephant Island, it's like a week long and just horrible conditions. I mean, freezing water. Not only cold, but you're wet now too. And it wasn't horrible seas at this point. It's just mainly through the ice. The ice was breaking up like waves and stuff, but you still had to make your way through all this ice, and you couldn't go fast.
It was an unbearable 7-day journey in the small boats, but everyone survives, and the men are relieved to finally step onto land.
And once they get on shore at Elephant Island, that was the first time they'd been on land in 500 days. They were kind of relieved, even though there's really no hope of rescue by chance. No one's going to come by this island, but you kind of take a breath. And once they get to Elephant Island, the Shackleton knows there's no hope of being rescued there, so he can't just stay there. So he makes the plan that he's going to take 6 guys in one of the boats, and the carpenter takes apart or modifies the other 2 boats into a shelter for the guys who are going to stay on Elephant Island, while Shackleton and these other 5 go off to try to get help. So they take some parts from the other boats to make the walls a little higher on the boat Shackleton's going to be taken out into the ocean and modify that the best they can. They're closest actually to like Cape Horn, South America, just distance-wise, but that's not the way the wind is blowing. You know, they don't have a whole lot of control on their little sailboat where they're going to steer to. So he decides their best bet is to try to hit South Georgia Island, which is where they kicked off the whole expedition. But it's 1,500 kilometers away. And this is, even to this day, everyone will tell you it's like the roughest oceans on Earth is stretched down here. So just ice cold, treacherous water in your 20-foot boat.
Shackleton must decide who will go with him and who will stay on Elephant Island and wait in the makeshift shelter. He takes the navigator, Frank Hurley, as well as the experienced sailor, Tom Crean. Notably, he takes the problematic carpenter with him too.
One decision he made, he took the carpenter with him to South Georgia Island. It probably wasn't a lot, like he felt he would need him, but he thought it was a problem.
Yeah, I think
and he
that's...
didn't want to leave him with all the guys who were going to have to, you know, the guys on Elephant Island are these super tight quarters. Who knows how long.
And they're dealing with their own mental challenges of not knowing what's going on in the other. And I think that's what I'm thinking of. He thought this guy would maybe bring down morale.
Yeah.
And so he elected to, hey, I can deal with him. I can handle this guy here. But if left to his own devices back at camp, it would really be an issue.
Yeah, he really didn't like the carpenter.
I was thinking in my head, I would probably almost rather be in the boat.
More in control.
Yeah. And you just,
than
not knowing.
Right.
Then, you know, and you're just around that island, you have no idea.
This 1,500 kilometer boat voyage trying to hit South Georgia, considered greatest or one of the greatest small boat voyages of all time.
Well, and
for what they had to do.
How big is their target? I mean, their target's tiny.
Tiny. Yeah. I heard some quote people say it's like 1 in a million chances of hitting South Georgia in the open ocean, which that doesn't make sense because like there's only so many degrees of but you know, maybe 1 in 10, I don't know.
It's like have you seen the Seinfeld with the proctologist? Kramer says something about if you ever get in a room with a proctologist, you got to get them cornered. They got the greatest stories, and it always ends with, it was a 1 in a million shot, doc.
If they miss South Georgia, that's like basically the direction the wind and ocean's taking them. So that's why they choose that's their best bet.
And if they miss it,
they're out.
Gone.
They're out in the open Atlantic. You know, there's nothing. So these 22 guys on Elephant Island are putting all their trust in these 6 guys that are going off, trying to hit South Georgia in their little boat. And they're stuck there, obviously having no idea how that's going and what the status of their potential rescue is. So the navigator has to take all these positions constantly as they're going. You know, it's not just like point this way, let's hope we hit it. They start out more northward on purpose to try to get the best angle. I think to get out of the ice and get the best angle coming in. But they're trying to take the position of the sun, you know, get positioning as much as they can so they can chart the best course from there.
They can steer a little bit.
Yeah, they have a sail.
But just not.
I mean, you can't go,
you just can't go against the grain.
They're very much. But yeah, they have a little room. So it's not just, let's hope the ocean takes us there. Somehow get your position, which apparently is tough because the ocean was so rough. You have to be like level to know where the sun is in relation to the horizon to get your correct positioning. So they would like wait till they're at the crest of a wave because that was like the level point. And you try to get a position quick.
So the choppier the sea, the tougher that becomes then.
Yeah. At one point, Shackleton thinks he sees the flat horizon, like open sky. He sees white stripe in the horizon. He's like, all right, we got open sky ahead. And then he realizes it's the white caps of a giant wave coming. So
I mean, I can just like how disorienting that would be.
Just seems impossible. I guess, they had rocks at the bottom. They had it weighted. Try not to tip over. That just always seems, even in big boats, when you see like footage of it in a storm, it's like, how does it not just tip over on giant waves?
Right.
A lot of the journey was like 3 guys trying to rest. I mean, you couldn't really sleep much, I'm sure. You're like huddled in the bottom of this boat, trying to get as much sleep as you can. They had a little stove that would run off sealed blubber with them so they could cook hot meals once a day. They had like a tank of water with them, but that one of the 2 got punctured as they were leaving, so they had a lot less than they wanted to start with. So they're getting extremely dehydrated as they went along. When they know they're probably getting close, they make a last minute adjustment. They think they might be headed, what would that be? The more northern side of the island. So they make the call to tip south a bit just to try to make sure they hit some part of the land. And that turned out to be a good decision because they turned and ended up hitting that very tip. So if they wouldn't have made that last minute adjustment, they would have just missed it completely. But they see the land in the distance, and it's like the worst hurricane these guys have ever experienced, or right when they're getting to land. So it's like, we made it, but they can't make landfall for a whole nother day. They're just trying to survive this storm. It's not like you just, all right, here's a beach, let's get on land. It's like rocky, the boat's just going to get shattered if you can't control it while you're trying to make a landfall. So you have to wait for the storm to die down. And they eventually make landfall in a little inlet. The boat is pretty beaten up. This had been like 14 days after they left, so it's basically a 2-week journey in total.
I almost feel like I remember them being at risk at some point of being like taken back to sea or something with the winds, or
I think.
But that was a risk they had to take to get to a place where they could make landfall.
Yeah, if you don't play that right, there's nothing you're just blowing out to sea still.
Yeah.
So it's still pretty dangerous.
The men endure the hurricane, and the next day, they are finally able to make a safe landfall on South Georgia. But they have landed on the exact opposite side of the island of where they need to be to make contact with the whalers. What should be the end of their struggle turns into the beginning of one of the most treacherous overland journeys imaginable.
So they find this safer beach to finally come ashore on, and storms past everything, but they're on the complete wrong side of the island. There's no whaling stations, no inhabitants on this side. It's on the complete opposite tip. All right, now we got to make a plan to somehow get to that other side. It's not just like a tiny island. You just hike down the beach to the other side, It's mountainous, glaciers, ice everywhere, and no one had ever crossed South Georgia at this point. So they were the first to even have to try anything like this if they're going to try to get to the other side to get help, because the whalers have no reason really to get over where they were. I mean, maybe eventually, but then again, you don't want to just wait, because they got guys with them that are in rough condition with those 6, and then you got all the guys back at Elephant Island. So you're not just thinking of yourselves at this point. They know they've got to find a way to get over to the other side. At this point, they kind of camp out for a few days. They do some hunting. They get fed and regain some strength, get fresh water. And Shackleton decides that 3 of them are going to go try to make the journey to the other side, to the whaling station, to get help. So it's crazy, after all, everything they've been through. They're on the island they need to be on to rescue everyone.
But they have to do something that's never before been done.
Probably one of the most dangerous parts is still upcoming.
Yeah.
The other thing is they don't have like polar expedition. Like if you're going mountaineering today, you got right coats and warm weather stuff.
Yeah.
And they say that the gear Shackleton's guys had was kind of laughable by any standard today, for sure.
And they would they have had, when I pictured people mountaineering and stuff, I'm thinking like they've got picks. Like would they have had any of that stuff?
No, so the carpenter takes screws out of the boat and puts it in their shoes of the 3 guys who are going to make this hike. So they kind of, to get more traction
Wow.
on the ice, they took the little stove with them, like enough food for 3 days maybe at the most. Eventually the weather seems right and they know they got to go soon to get help. So they end up leaving at 3 a.m. to start their trek. It's dark, obviously, and they don't have maps of this terrain because no one's ever done this before. So they have to like find the route across in the dark. And there's several times they're trying to, they know like where different bays are from their coastal maps. So along the way, they're like, oh, that looks like this. Let's try this route. A couple times they have to backtrack a couple hours because they thought they were going one place and ended up in a dead end. And one notable point they come to, they kind of get to the peak of some of these inland mountains, and it's just dark and foggy. And Shackleton knows if they stay at this altitude much longer, they can't really survive with the gear they have.
Because of the cold, or?
Cold, yeah, they can't get stuck up there.
With night approaching, Shackleton knows their only hope of survival is to get to a lower altitude fast. But there is no safe way down, and they seem to be out of options.
They tried cutting steps like in the ice, but that was just taking too long. So at one point, they coiled up all the rope they had with them and like turned it into a sled and just jumped off this mountain, foggy abyss.
Not knowing what's
down there. You just hope that, it stays a smooth, snowy slope. And they go like 3,000 feet down in like 3 minutes.
The 3 men are exhilarated and relieved. They shake hands, and Shackleton reportedly says, it's not good to do that type of thing too often.
So that was a big kind of climactic point. Who knows?
Yeah.
This whole story would have been nothing.
Miles.
28 guys died in the Antarctic, and I guess you could kind of piece it together, maybe find their bodies and what they tried doing, but it could all come down to that. This was so close.
Miles from the finish line.
Never get there. So that night, they're all tired, and the guys want to take a quick nap. So Shackleton says they can take a half-hour nap and they'll keep going, but he wakes them up after just 5 minutes. He tells them it's been a half an hour.
Because he knew
He knows it's probably not going to wake up if your body's going to shut down. If you give it too much time to rest like that, just because the cold conditions they were in. So they get kind of to that next morning. So this would be over 24 hours after they left. 7 a.m. the next morning, they hear what they think's like a whaling station whistle in the distance, like calling all the guys to work. And so they're pretty sure that's what they heard. They know. They do those whistles at like half-hour intervals, so they're like, let's wait, see if we hear it again, then we'll know for sure. Like, we're pretty close. And so they hear it again, and they all shake hands again. All right, we know we're not too far off. We just keep going in this direction. It's got to be down there somewhere. Kind of get into the outskirts of camp. And apparently the first people to see him was a couple kids who ran off terrified. Got these 3 haggard.
Oh, I can't imagine what you did.
And their faces were like black apparently because of the blubber they were burning on these stoves, like the soot.
Oh, yeah.
So just all bearded, overgrown, soot on their faces. Just rough. Been 2 years, 2 years since they've been in civilization. In this station, there's never strangers.
Right.
These whaling you know everybody.
Yeah.
How some guys just walk out of the mountains.
Just walk. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, scared some people. They make their way into the little town, ask to see the manager, who they knew from when they set out on their mission. And apparently they were so unrecognizable that the manager didn't even know who they were. I couldn't even put it together. And this was almost 2 years later. So they get fed, take baths and everything for the first time, these 3 guys. And the very next day, they go around to rescue the other 3 who are just right there on the other side of South Georgia, because they know right where they are. The last struggle, it seems like it's all good, I made contact, go get the Elephant Island guys, call it good, but ended up taking 4 months before they finally rescued the guys on Elephant Island.
Because of the weather?
Because of the ice. Like, the ice had come in and blocked out around Elephant Island. You couldn't get to it. So around midday, a couple guys are outside of the hut, and they notice this kind of strange piece of ice on the horizon. Then pretty quickly, they realize it's a ship, and they call out to all the guys in the hut, and it just creates a hysteria. Before there was time for a reply, there was a rush of members tumbling over one another, all mixed up with mugs of seal hoosh, making a simultaneous dive for the door hole, which was immediately torn to shreds, so that those members who could not pass through it on account of the crush made their exits through the wall, or what remained of it. We had the fear that those on board might not have seen us. The terrible thought crept into our minds that we would then be left on Elephant Island to die. For by this time we could not have held out for more than a few days. At last, someone shouted out to Sir Ernest, "Are you all well?" To which he laughingly replied, "Don't we look all right now that we've washed?" For evidently our filthy condition had not failed to attract his notice. And then we burst into a hearty laugh, which was followed by the rowers as soon as they saw what he was laughing at. And then, like silly schoolgirls, we all started giggling and looking at each other's black faces. Somehow all of them survived. They just stayed behind.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So towards the end, they were basically on the brink of starvation. Like, they're eating seaweed, just like stuff to try to inch by. So somehow they all survived. The guy, Frank Wild, was the guy left in charge on Elephant Island, and they say like his leadership and optimism, kept everyone from going insane. Kept them through all that. He'd have them like pack up all their belongings every morning at one point. Like, boss might be coming today. Let's get ready, guys. Just to get in that routine or whatever. Keep hope
today.
So all the Shackleton's guys survived, but then like a lot of them went off to the war right when they got back.
Oh my gosh.
Some of them died then.
Could you imagine?
I mean, you gotta think the type of guy if you're gonna sign up for this, you're probably gonna be the guy who's gonna jump into the war too.
Yeah, holy cow. Finish that and then head to the front lines of World War I.
Trappings of civilization are soon cast aside in the face of stern realities, and given the barest opportunity of winning food and shelter, man can live and even find his laughter ringing true. Just when things looked their worst, they changed for the best. I've marveled often at the thin line that divides success from failure, and the sudden turn that leads from apparently certain disaster to comparative safety. We had seen God in his splendors, heard the text that nature renders. We had reached the naked soul of man.